The ACC distributed a record amount of money to the member schools from 2023-24. The only problem? It's still not enough.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Friday, May 23rd, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank you for making us your first listen or watch of the day to get your Friday going the right way. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. I want to welcome in all the everydayers who are here with us, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord and the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders. It's great to see every one of you as we get into Memorial Day weekend. Let's get right into it. Speaking of Memorial Day weekend, I do want to make a note for you. I'm actually out of town this weekend for the Indy 500. I'm going with some buddies. I've never been. It's going to be super fun. But with that in mind, I already recorded Monday's show because I won't be able to do that this weekend. So that means I won't be able to hit any of the headlines on Monday from this weekend, including ACC tournament in baseball and women's lacrosse Final Four, or any other big news that crops up. Any of that we will hit on Tuesday's show, but I just want to make you aware of that on Monday when you're listening and you're like, why isn't Isaac talking about any of that? So there you go. Anyway, today, the ACC distributed a record amount of money to the member schools from the 2023-24 fiscal year, but it's still not enough to keep up with the top two conferences. But is there hope on the horizon? We're going to look at both parts of that. And then, of course, I just mentioned it, but baseball begins postseason play. The Diamond Heels today and their quest to make it to Omaha for a second straight year, while women's lacrosse is going for their fourth ever national championship this weekend. All that coming up today. But here we go. Let's get into this financial conversation. So David Hale from ESPN recently wrote up a really nice, helpful article. If you want to go check it out, you can do that. Talking about the ACC's revenue distribution, right? This has been a point of massive conversation for a long time now about the SEC and the Big Ten having a big old fat lead over the ACC and everyone else for that matter in terms of how much money they are paying out to their member schools. A lot of the conversation has been for a while, how can the ACC make up ground? Can they break the grant of rights and start a new media deal to try to get more money? Blah, blah, blah. All these options, right? Clemson, Florida State, suing the conference. All of this has happened. And so now we're starting to find out, is the money catching up? Well, David Hale reported on the ACC's payouts from the 2023-24 academic year. So not just the year we just finished, but 2023-24, because new tax documents have now come out and you can see all that. So Hale reports that the ACC generated $711 million for the 23-24 academic year. And again, he's finding this from the tax documents released by the league. So it's all, like verifiable information. And he says the payout to each of the 14 full-time member schools was $45 million. And that's a record for the ACC. That needs to be celebrated. Absolutely, it does. By the way, Isaac, why did you say just 14 member schools aren't full-time member schools? Aren't there 18? What are we doing? Well, keep in mind, this was from the 2023-24 academic year. Let me emphasize that again, meaning the three new schools hadn't come into the conference yet. So this doesn't include SMU, Cal, or Stanford. So that gets you down to 15. And then also make sure you note the verbiage. Each of the 14 full-time member schools got $45 million. Full-time, specifically meaning no Notre Dame, right? Yes. Now, I did some research on it. Notre Dame reportedly did get a payout of just shy of half of that $45 million. About 20.7 is the reported payout of what Notre Dame did get. So that's why it's 14 instead of 18. Hope that makes sense. So $45 million, that's a record for ACC schools. Here's the big, massive, frustrating problem. It's still not enough. I mean, it's more than people could dream about, right? But it's still not enough in terms of keeping up with the SEC and the Big Ten. The ACC is third among conferences, and that's fine. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's fine. It's fine. We're doing fine, right? And the other good news is that it's a comfortable third place. The down to fourth place is a comfortable margin, but the other problem is that it's also a comfortable margin for the SEC and the Big Ten ahead of the ACC. So the ACC is kind of like this lone tier, second tier, but all alone, which is good and bad. That distance up to the SEC and the Big Ten is sizable, and that is not great. To put some numbers on that, David Hale reports in his article that the SEC reported in February that they distributed about $53 million to each school for this same cycle for 23-24, $808 million. As a reminder, the ACC generated $711 million. So almost $100 million more dollars from the SEC and about $8 million more dollars given out to each school. But that fiscal year was 23-24. The SEC just started a brand new media deal that started after that. It started for the 24-25 academic year. So the SEC already was up about $8 million a school, and now they've got a new media deal on top of that to make the gap even bigger. That's not good. How about the Big Ten? Well, they haven't reported their 23-24 numbers yet like the ACC and SEC have. But from 2022-23, they report about $880 million in revenue. And so, a bigger number there. But keep in mind, they started a new media deal on July 1st, 2023, prior to the numbers that we have. After the numbers that we have of the Big Ten's 2022-23 number. And so they are also going to jump up astronomically. So the SEC and Big Ten already ahead of the ACC before they started these media deals, which is only going to further the chasm, further the gap between the haves and the sort of haves. Oh, like the ACC is certainly not the have-nots, right? But again, we're not the SEC, we're not the Big Ten. And, I guess there is a sentiment of like, Isaac, isn't that good enough to be third? Well, I would compare that, and that's a fair question to ask. I would compare the answer to that to Carolina as an institution, right? Like if you said, hey, man, that's great. We made the NCAA tournament this year in men's basketball. Yeah. But is that Carolina standard? Hey, if you're the third seed in the NCAA tournament, okay, that's nice. But that's not Carolina standard. We strive for excellence of being elite, top tier in everything. So whether that is how the 28 varsity sports are performing, which they're performing very well. I think I saw a number the other day, like 26 of the 28 varsity athletics made the postseason. That's insane, man. Great stuff. We need to unpack that when the season is all said and done for everybody. But similar to how Carolina as a program, as an institution, expects to be elite. For me, there was an expectation of the same of the conference that institution is in. Third is fine. But Carolina is a school that strives to be in the elite of the elite conferences, athletically. And that either means the ACC catching up or something else. And that's, man, I think that's the thing to weigh out here is it more important to be in the ACC in third or more important to be first, but in a different conference? Ooh, that's the tough one for me. And it's like, Isaac, why are we so worried about chasing the dollars? Well, because all of that filters down and then that translates to success on the field or on the court or whatever, whatever. So that's the reckoning of all of that. So that's where the conversation needs to go next, right? Being in third is not good enough, but is there some hope on the horizon? I think so, but the big question for me, will it work? We'll try to unpack that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Monarch Money, do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Because between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's so easy to lose track of it all. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility of and control over all of your finances. And while Monarch Money is a budgeting app, it's not just that. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start actually building wealth. And instead of having to juggle multiple apps and like scrolling through them on your phone, you can use Monarch as a one-stop shop for everything, to check your finances, to track your spending, and even plan long-term goals, or maybe budget out a summer trip or whatever it is. Part of this for me is that my wife and I want to be on the same page all the time when it comes to finances. That matters to us. And thankfully, Monarch Money helps take all the stress out of that. That's great news. So join us. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, we're talking money today. Super exciting, like dinner conversation, right? Like we don't talk about finances at Thanksgiving dinner. That gets people leaving the table and mad. Anyway, the ACC in a distant third place to the Big Ten and the SEC. We just talked about the possibility of like, do you care more about being in the ACC, but it being third? Or do you care more about being in an elite conference, whether it's the SEC or Big Ten? That's a question that we've all got to answer. And I think that's a tough one. But let's think about a world where we are working to stay in the ACC and catch up. How could that happen, whether for the ACC as an entity or for the individual schools? Because while I care about the ACC, I love it. And it's part of the DNA of my life. I grew up on this conference and I hate the thought of the loss of it. But I care infinite, like push comes to shove, I care more about the Tar Heels than I do our beloved conference. And so I'm thankful for some hope within the ACC, but that means good things for the Tar Heels. Here's what I mean. Reminder that with FSU and Clemson suing the ACC and going through all that, the ACC finally acquiesced to a new revenue distribution model that is no longer balanced and even, and hey, everybody gets a participation medal. Now, the top performing schools from a postseason standpoint in football in both men's and women's basketball, and some brand name schools, that Carolina Blue goes really well, stand to make more money. And so this idea of it not being balanced and even, not being equitable amongst all the membership, of course, SMU, I forget how many years is it, right? That they're like, hey, we don't need your money because SMU is loaded as a school. But it's going to be difficult for some schools who either aren't successful on the field of play or who don't have the brand recognition that schools like a Carolina has. A couple things with this. There are now what's called, quote, success initiatives. And unfortunately for schools that are really strong in non-revenue sports, it's not really going to matter, those success initiatives for them in terms of payouts. It will matter for teams that are successful in football, which, you know, is like there are a couple revenue sports. Football is the revenue sport. You know, I as a basketball fan chiefly wish it was basketball first and foremost. I recognize plain as day that football is the one. And so to that end, you know, I love Carolina pouring resources into football in terms of player personnel, in terms of coaches and all that. I don't want to do it to spite basketball. That is the big concern, especially as we get to the House settlement and, you know, you've got this lump sum for all your sports that you can pay out from that revenue distribution. I think what is it, $20.5 million for this first season it's supposed to be. That's going to really benefit like Big East schools who outside of UConn, none of them have football. So they can pour that all into basketball, or Gonzaga is in a similar place there. Anyway, so higher payouts of postseason revenue to certain levels of postseason success for football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. So Carolina being successful on the field in those three sports in particular, like I love Carolina's success across the athletic spectrum, and it's phenomenal. But from a financial standpoint, what really matters is those three sports in terms of how the ACC is paying out postseason rev. Okay. And then keep in mind also, there are going to be payouts, extra unequal payouts for brand. And that's going to be based on TV ratings over a 5-year span. And, the numbers are out there and they've come out, but we know that Carolina is in great shape from that standpoint. And you just want to keep finding ways to get the Carolina brand out there. Yes, that is about being successful on the field of play, because people look at that and they're like, oh, I like that. But also just the Carolina blue, the Argyle, man, all these things matter at a national and international level. And so the more eyeballs you get tuning in, the more that's going to mean for this brand payout. So just turn your TV on a Tar Heel sporting event and let it roll. Now, here's the big thing. You might be saying, all right, Isaac, so why weren't these numbers reflected in that 23-24 money we were just talking about? What's going on there? Why was it equal across the board, $45 million per school? Great question yet. Here's what you got to keep in mind. This new success initiatives and the brand payouts weren't in place yet for the 2023-24 academic year, which is the year in question that we're talking about. They are starting for the year that just finished, 2024-25. So we won't see how that payout goes until this time next year when the ACC releases their tax documents from the 24-25 fiscal year. Does that make sense? Also, I'm hopeful that the ACC, we don't know how this is going to go because we haven't seen it yet. I'm hopeful that the ACC gives an itemized report of what amount is postseason success, what amount is brand payout success, what are the levels of those. We just don't know that yet because it hasn't happened. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. But I'm hopeful that help is on the horizon here, that Carolina being a brand and a successful on-field product will start to catch up because of this now inequity of revenue share payout, will start to catch up with the Big Ten and SEC schools. And I don't know how close the gap has to be, but you just want to inch your way closer to where you feel like you're in good shape. Now, there are other ways and methods that Carolina can and should explore to catch up as well. And we'll see if they do that. But right now, we're just talking about the revenue share side of it and how can Carolina catch up that way. But everything is just so in flux. It's hard to know if these numbers will put Carolina in a good spot. So that's what we're looking at for this time next year. But also, we want to look at the kind of now, the short term and the long term. Commissioner Jim Phillips said at the ACC spring meetings last week, he believes this new kind of payout structure will provide stability for the league for the next 3 to 4 years. And look, that's a nice stopgap, but I need long-term assurances, right? There's a big difference between saying it will provide stability and him saying, yeah, I believe it's going to provide stability for the league. I don't need belief. I need certainty. I need to know that my institution is going to be able to start getting closer to the SEC and Big Ten schools. I don't want to have to depend on postseason success or brand payout. Those are nice things, but I want to know that just at a baseline, what we're getting because of the revenue share payout is going to get us there. So there's that. And I mean, look, we got to recognize that part of this is he says 3 to 4 years. We truly don't know what the landscape of college athletics will look like in 3 to 4 years. Think back 3 to 4 years. It looked wildly different than it does today. That's part of this as well. And we also don't know what this is all going to look like post-House settlement, how that's going to go through and the particulars of that. So I think for now, we just continue to jostle for positioning, keep finding ways for Carolina specifically to make up the revenue gap up to the SEC and Big Ten. So whether that's what the ACC is doing, or whether it's like you find your own independent ways to catch up, which I hope Carolina will be continuing to do, because there are other methods and modes, and we'll continue to talk about those as well. But that's where we're at for today. Again, good news that the ACC is giving out record amounts of money, but it's still not enough. And we're going to see this time next year if these new success initiatives and brand power money will help catch up. All right, let's get to the weekend whip around. Only a few teams left playing for the 23-24 academic year, but baseball, Diamond Heels get going with ACC tournament action tonight, while women's lacrosse today starts their journey in the Final Four and a shot at another NCAA championship. We'll get to all that in just a second. Okay, it's time for the weekend whip around, a rapidly shrinking weekend whip around because there are not many teams left because we're getting close to the summer. But teams still playing means Carolina is having success. So let's start with baseball, which is in the ACC tournament. Remember, Carolina is the 3 seed, so they've had a double bye. They didn't have to play Tuesday or Wednesday. Half of the quarterfinals happened yesterday on Thursday. The other half, including Carolina's game, is today, Friday. The Tar Heels catch a bit of a break, get to play number 14 seed Boston College. We'll unpack that in a second. But the game is tonight, Friday, May 23rd, 7 p.m. Eastern on ACC Network. The whole tournament, by the way, is on ACC Network if you're trying to find it, other than the championship game, which, if I remember correctly, is on ESPN2. And that'll be on Sunday. I do know that. And the game is in Durham, North Carolina at the Bulls ballpark. Man, well, it's such a cool stadium. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's really neat. I've actually eaten at the restaurant that's just up on top of left field there. Really, really cool stuff. So Boston College is the team Carolina's playing, the 14th seed, who beat Virginia, the 6th seed, on Wednesday night in a late game. Boston College wins 12-8. And this is where you hate that they split up the quarterfinals into 2 on Thursday and 2 on Friday. I was very hopeful. Like, if Carolina was playing yesterday, that means that BC would have come off a game. Like, it was the top of the second at 11 p.m. I remember checking out. I was watching the game, and it was already like 5-2 BC at that point, by the way. So, man, regardless, though, they had to play a super late game on Wednesday, and Tuesday night, they needed extra innings to win their first game to get past it into playing Virginia. And so Carolina is going to play a team that is going to be energy depleted, even though there is the day off for Boston College on Thursday. It is helpful that Carolina gets them instead of Virginia, because part of that is, in order to have won an extra innings game on Tuesday, to have played a 12-8 game late on Wednesday, BC has gone through a lot of their pitching. Their number one, Colarusso, I think is how you say his last name, started on Tuesday. He didn't throw like 100 pitches, but he got to 72. I wouldn't be surprised if in a pinch they went to him. I don't think they'll start him. Maybe as an opener for an inning. But then on Wednesday, they threw their number 2 pitcher, Miller. He threw 60 pitches. Sorry, did I say Tuesday? I meant Wednesday. And then they had 3 other pitchers in those first 2 games that got to about 60 pitches. So Boston College has had 5 pitchers, including their number 1 and 2 starters, both get up to around 60 pitches. So I'm expecting for this game tonight, either a bullpen game or just like, all hands on deck, string it together, because Boston College isn't making the NCAA tournament outside of winning the ACC tournament. And so they're going to do anything they've got to do. No clue what starting lineups are going to look like in terms of their pitching. But again, I think we will see a lot of arms from the Eagles. On the Carolina side of it, I think the big question is, because you're getting to face Boston College, do you start Jake Knapp, or do you save him for a potential semifinal or championship game? For me, I say you just do what you do. Because basically, if Carolina is able to make the championship, it would be like a normal weekend series where they play tonight, Friday, they play tomorrow, Saturday, if they win, and then play again Sunday, if they win. So I say, if I'm Scott Forbes, I'm rolling with Jake Knapp tonight. And if I win, I'm rolling with DeCaro tomorrow in the semifinal. And then if you make it to the championship, you roll with Houck. Because at that point, that's a cherry on top. And here's what I mean. For Carolina, they're in a great spot right now to be one of the top 8 national seeds, which means you host a regional. And if you win that, you also get to host a super regional, regardless of what anybody else does. For Carolina, they are in that position right now. Most projections I've seen has them as like the number 4 national seed. And so Carolina doesn't really need to win the ACC championship or even make the ACC championship to do that. But I do think they have to beat Boston College tonight or they lose some seeding. So that's another reason to just roll with Knapp tonight. Let him be dominant. Don't second guess it. Just do what you've done all season long. The other part of it is I'm basing this on history as well. Last year, I can't remember if it was, I don't remember when I was having this thought, whether it was for the ACC tournament. No, it was for the regional. And I was like, do you start DeCaro, who was your number 1 at that point? Or do you go with somebody else against Long Island and save DeCaro for like LSU or something? Well, he went, if my memory is right, he went with DeCaro in that first game. And so history says that he will go with Knapp tonight. And again, I think that's the right call because honestly, the most important game of the ACC tournament for the Tar Heels in terms of NCAA tournament seeding is tonight. Don't mess around the night, start Knapp, get a win, and move on. The other games, the semifinals that were played Thursday were Georgia Tech, the 1 seed, against Cal, the 16 seed, who also made it through, and then 4 NC State against 5 Clemson. I'm recording before either of those games go final, so I don't know who won them yet. And then the other semifinal today on Friday is number 2 FSU against number 7 Duke. So if Carolina beats BC tonight, they will either have a rematch with FSU or play Duke again on Saturday in the semifinals. Should they win that one, the championship would either be Georgia Tech, NC State, Clemson, or Cal. So honestly, it really feels, and again, this is because of the weird seeding stuff we talked about earlier this week, that if it's Carolina and Florida State in the semifinal, honestly, that's your ACC championship. Those are the best 2 teams, and that's where we're at. So good luck to the fellas tonight, man. Again, this is the most important game, despite it not being an elite team, because a loss to Florida State, it just wouldn't hurt you. That's why tonight matters. Okay, women's lacrosse, win or lose in the ACC NCAA semifinals, the Final Four today. It has been an absolutely dominant season for Jenny Levy's team. I mean, wild. Sometime next week when the season is over, we'll tie a bow on this thing because the numbers are mind-bogglingly astounding and it is deserving of praise, right? And so we'll talk about that next week. Again, win or lose today in the semifinals, win or lose Sunday in the national championship. But what's cool about the national semifinals is it's basically all the 1 seeds advance, just like this year's basketball Final Four. It's Carolina number 1 overall, Boston College number 2 overall, Northwestern number 3 overall, and Florida number 4 overall. And that's who Carolina plays today is the Gators. 3 Eastern on ESPNU. Funny, it's in Gillette Stadium, the home of the Patriots. We're just so connected to the Patriots now, right? Like Coach Belichick is the head coach of football. Drake May up there. We'll see. Maybe Drake May will be in attendance. I think Mac Hollins is a Patriot now as well. Carolina and Florida played in the regular season in Gainesville back on February 14th. Carolina won that one 14-9 on the road. For Florida, their only other loss this season was to a ranked James Madison team. And they've gone on a long winning streak, just like the Tar Heels, but their competition has been nowhere near the level of Carolina, right? Who has played like Carolina has played and beat all 3 of the other schools in the Final Four, including Boston College twice and Northwestern, which is the other semifinal, BC against Northwestern. What's nice about being the number 1 overall seed is that I think there is a gap from Carolina, BC, and Northwestern to Florida. And so Carolina, I mean, anything could happen, right? Florida could obviously beat Carolina. That is a reality that could happen today because it's sport, right? But I think of these 4, Carolina gets a break playing Florida, while BC and Northwestern have to play each other, battle it out, and then Carolina ostensibly would get to play the winner of that one. I expect a third, if we're being honest, the two best teams are Carolina and BC. So I'm expecting a third matchup between those two on Sunday for the national championship. Reminder, Carolina won the first two. Cliche, it's hard to beat a team 3 times, but we'll see what happens. The championship, if Carolina should get there, is noon on Sunday on ESPNU. And as a reminder, let me just say one more time before we get out of the show today here, that on Monday's show, we won't have the results of the baseball ACC tournament or women's lacrosse. We'll get to all of that on Tuesday's show, including the baseball selection show results, which is Monday. So we'll know Carolina's regional result or regional matchups when we get together again on Tuesday. All right, guys, thanks so much for being here with me on a Friday to wrap up the show. I know it's always weird to talk about money, but I think it is just a helpful conversation. So I appreciate you diving in with me on that. If you've not joined and subscribed to Locked On Tar Heels on video and audio, make sure you do that right now so you don't miss a second. If you're not part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, we'd love to have you there as well. That link is in the show notes. Absolutely free to join. And if you want to go even deeper with the show and have one-on-one conversation with me and other perks, including priority for mailbag episodes, which we're recording one of those next week. So get in your mailbag episodes. You can do that on Insiders. You can do it on Twitter or Discord or wherever you want to. Send those in and we'll have them ready for a show next week. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. We'll talk again on Monday, pre-recorded show. But until then, peace.